Sun City book lovers, welcome to Meet the Author. This show is made possible by Sun City Hilton Head Lifestyle Services, giving us a chance to learn more about the books we want to read and the people who create them.
Who doesn't love reading a good mystery? This month's Meet the Author features Donna Keel Armer, who delivers a compelling mystery series with her two books, The Red Starfish and Moringa Tree of Life. Let's meet the author. Donna, let's start off with you giving us an idea of when the reader picks up that book, The Red Starfish to start, let's say, what should they be expecting of that book in the series?
Wow, that is quite a question to start with, Georgia. I think I would answer it as each individual reader is probably going to have a different expectation. If they go with the synopsis, which you have to put a million thoughts into a few sentences, they can expect intrigue, they can expect mystery, murder, mayhem, the mafia. They can expect some highlights about the ecology of the ocean. They can certainly expect friendships in all different forms, passion, corruption, power. So I think there's a lot to choose from.
So what we're saying is this book is giving you a lot.
Yes.
Now, at what point when you began writing this, did you know that this would become a series?
I didn't know that at all. When I was writing my first book, which is nonfiction, Solo in Salento, I had already had the vision of writing a mystery.
Okay.
Not a series, just a mystery. And I was also, so I started writing it at the same time that had a publisher for Solo in Salento, and I was just going through all that process of getting the book released. And I was looking for another publisher by then. And when I found that publisher, I had sent her the manuscript, and she sent me a notice saying, can we Zoom? And we did. And she said to me, well, I really like this book, but I'd like to offer you a 3-book contract. And I'm like, what? What? I'm thinking, what would I write about next?
Ooh, wow.
So I was floored and thrilled, and I just automatically said, oh, okay, I can do that.
Well, you've got so much going for you in these books, but let's start with talking about the two lead female characters, Cat, and we've got Stella. Mm-hmm. Which of those were easier for you to develop as you were blooming these stories, and why? Why was it easier?
Cat was easier for me because I know her. I know Cat. I know what she's thinking. She has just embedded herself into my brain. Stella is a person I think that from time to time we perhaps have in our lives, and we sometimes back away, we sometimes hold on too long. The thing about Stella that really surprised me, when I first started the book, I wrote only a couple of chapters about Stella, and I thought, that's it. I wake up in the middle of the night, and there's Stella yelling at me, I am a star. I want to have far more chapters in this book. So it was very difficult because I had to go back in and insert her in this book that was almost through and figure out what is going to happen with this. Mm-hmm. But they duked it out. They made the decisions about how it was all going to work.
Oh, I think that is so interesting because reading about how you have your writing process, you have said that, speaking of characters, place is and will always be a character in my writing. Yes. So here we go, place. Wow, how does that actually work into these two books? Explain that for our reader.
I will, because From the very earliest age, I grew up in a family where I was the youngest. I had a lot of siblings ahead of me, so everything was shared. I never had a private room, a private closet, a private anything. So I would create privacy by going inside my mind and finding those places that were special. And one of my favorite places that actually became a physical place was on the back porch under the table. We had a beautiful oak table that had been moved outside and replaced by one of those chrome and plastic things whenever those came into being. And so this beautiful oak table had a tablecloth on it, and I would crawl under there, always, particularly when there was a thunderstorm. And that place became my sacred, safe place. I've moved a million times, it seems like, in my life. So place, I just put my roots down. I don't know how long I'm going to be there, but that place becomes all important. And it becomes the safe part of my life. Italy became that for me. And then when I moved to the Lowcountry of South Carolina, it was magic, magic.
I think Italy owes you a love letter because you've certainly put in such beautiful descriptions. Everybody wants to go after reading the book. And I'm glad that you brought us to the Lowcountry. I like those books that have that local connection. Now, we start off with this gorgeous description of Italy. We've, introduced Cat. You've got Stella in there. So now as we merge into the second part of the series, what do we see happening with the Cat story? How is it different than Red Starfish in Moringa, the Tree of Life?
Well, it's very, very different, and from many standpoints. When Cat comes home to the Lowcountry, we learn about the business side of her, because that is not at all in the Red Starfish. There's a little bit at the beginning to tell you what she might be facing when she comes back, but not the real essence of what her business is about and how important that business is to her and those relationships that she has with the various characters in the book. So we learn about that. We learn about her passion, her connection to people. We learn about her fierceness when there are situations that she feels compelled to take a stand on. So we learn about those aspects of it. And we learn about, even though she's afraid, she forges ahead. And she's a strong, independent woman. And I think we see that more in Moringa, Tree of Life. And we also hit on topics that are very much in the news today: sex trafficking, world hunger, all of these things that add to the spell of the mystery, because they all have connections.
Well, we didn't want to lose the characters from the first book, so you've managed to, bring those into the story as well in a beautiful way, and I thought a very seamless way, so that was exciting to see. Now, you've already mentioned it. You've given us a great setting, you've given us a twisty little plot, you've given us characters we like. And you do feel that, as I read this, that you've brought to us social issues that we should be aware of, and we sometimes need to stop and think about. What influenced you to do that? I mean, you had a great book, but you've also added that element.
I think as a citizen, particularly of a free democratic world, it's my duty to do those things. But also, I went to university very late in life. I was 33 when I entered school, and that was based on the fact that I'd had a very difficult marriage, an abusive, alcoholic marriage. So I'd experienced firsthand some of these things. And so my undergraduate degree was in psychology, my graduate in theology. And one of the things that I did a stint in crisis counseling. And it brought home to me things that in a million years I would have never imagined. And I've kept those things close by because we need to be involved in these situations. We need to take stands on things that are so brutally wrong.
Your book, too, certainly emphasizes that. I think people would be very, very interested in how you've woven that in the plot. Is it ever a challenge to sort of give us those lessons, but yet keep us flowing in the story?
It hasn't been so far. I laugh because when I write, I just simply write. I have never had a writer's block because I see that as a negative thing. And so if I don't write, I'm just not writing. It's not because my mind's stopped up or don't have anything to create. I'm busy doing something else. So I write, I walk. I'm a walker. And when I'm walking, all these things come to me, these thoughts. So I go right back to the house, sit down at my computer, I incorporate those things. I also am a person who usually writes the last chapter first. And then I go all the way back to the beginning and I pull these threads through to create this tapestry. And in the Red Starfish, I had to change the ending, but not in Moringa. Moringa is word for word what I wrote in the very first draft. So I never know.
I don't know if I could do that, but I also can't write a book.
Sure
So
you can.
I'm going to ask you now, who influenced your writing?
Pat Conroy,
Oh.
what can I say? I want to be a Pat Conroy clone.
We are in Pat Conroy country.
are.
There are so many of you,
I know.
and so many of you blessed by his influence.
Yes, I met Pat in 1995. So meeting him that first time and understanding and getting a glimpse of his generosity and graciousness really set the place. Even though I wasn't considering writing, nothing, I just thought, what an incredible person. I had been to many author events and none of them were like Pat's. And then when I moved to the Lowcountry and met him again, it was just, oh yeah, I remember. You know, of course he didn't, but he was so gracious. Other writers that have influenced me, particularly in the mystery genre, are Louise Penny. She's a Canadian author. And then the Italian author that I love so much is Andrea Camilleri. He's written a Inspector Montalbano series in Sicily, and I've been to that part of Sicily, and it's just beautiful. The food is amazing, and his characters are characters that are rich and full of life. So that's been a great influence. But before I was born, I was being read to. And because I have all the other siblings, and there was always a story hour before bedtime. And so while I was still in the womb, I was being read to. And as soon as I was old enough, I had my first library card. And then one of the stories I loved to tell, when I was in second grade, our assignment was to write an autobiography. And everybody showed up with the one-page essay, and I showed up with the manuscript.
Okay.
But I let that passion go.
I was going to say.
I let it go.
Wow. It's funny how our lives get derailed. They really do. But you're back.
I'm back.
You're back,
I'm
and
back.
Pat Conroy would be so proud. He would be so proud. Now, you've got to tell us, what can we anticipate in the series and maybe in other writing projects that we can look forward to?
The greatest thing that happened to me recently was I was Zooming with my publisher again, and I said to her, I'm halfway through the manuscript in the third book in the series, which is called One Note Murders. And I said, Cat has said to me, I can't go on. There has to be a decision made. Will there be another book? Because if there's not another book, I've got to figure out how to end this book to make it right. She said, but she's in Italy in the third book. She says, I want to come home to the Lowcountry. I want another book. So I said to my wonderful publisher, Stephanie, I said, Cat wants book number 4. She says, well, we better listen to her. So there will be a book number 4. And then I'm also dabbling with 2 nonfictions. And I'm pretty excited about both of those. And I don't want to reveal them quite yet.
Okay.
But I've also been writing short travel stories, and I've been in 3 anthologies, travel anthologies. I've got short stories, and one on Paris, one on London, and one on Rome. So I'm just writing all the time. I love it. I'm happiest when I'm doing that. I'm just in love with it.
And thank you for making us so happy reading all of these things that you're working so hard at.
Thank you.
Readers can keep up with you via your website. Is that a good approach?
Yes, that's a very good approach. My website, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all the usual places.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you for sharing your time. We're excited to hear your presentation where we're going to even learn more.
Thank you so much, Georgia. It's been a delight. Solo in Salento is my very first book, and it's nonfiction. And the reason I want to share this with you is because all of my other books come out of Solo in Salento. If you haven't read this book, it's about a journey I made as a solo female to Italy. I stayed by myself in a little teeny tiny town in the heel of the boot in the region of Puglia, in a little town called Otranto. It was a very, very special time in my life because I was sorting out a lot of garbagey things that had been going on, and also because I have a very understanding husband, there's Ray over there, who supported my need to do this solo trip. But every title of my books, other books, come out of this book, and the idea of writing a mystery book came out of this book. And in fact, when I started this journey, I got so much flack from my family, even from close friends who said, women don't travel solo, and not for long times like that. Why are you doing this? So I lied about it. I said, well, I'm going to go write a book. I had never written a book. I hadn't thought about writing a book, but I thought, well, I can't lie, because Mom always said you can't lie. So I started out writing a book while I was there, just kind of some thoughts and things. So everything goes back to this book. But it wasn't until we moved to Beaufort, South Carolina in 2014 that the magic just happened. And all of you live here in the Lowcountry, so I hope you understand that magic I'm talking about. This place is beautiful. It is full of that mystery. If you've gotten up in the morning and the steam is rising off the river and the dolphins are doing a dance, and it's just a place that has this creative energy in it. So I took advantage of that. And the first thing I did was look for a writing class, because I thought, I don't know much about writing. So I found this group, and the criteria for becoming a member was that you had to write an essay, you had to show up, you had to read it, and they critiqued it. Who in their right mind would do that? Chapter 45 is right at the end of this trip. I've stayed in this little town for 5 weeks, and this is the last time I'm going to be having my evening meal there, and it's going to be at my favorite restaurant. So this is what I say. For my last supper in Otranto, I choose Il Cantico dei Cantici. I choose this place because it translates as Song of Songs. The main street, Via Castello, escorts me down the cobbled path. My eyes study the way with purpose and resolve, drinking in every detail as my last. The evening's hush caresses the village. Birds snuggle into their nest with last bits of tweets and twitters. Caramelized onions and sweet roasted garlic float on the tender breeze. Benevolent laughter circles, and the music, always the music. It moves with my breath. It lifts a single drumbeat into my heart, creating mosaic melodies, notes drifting out to sea, enticing tears to my eyes. And I wrote that book. It took me 4 years to write it. Actually, it only took me 1 year to write it. It took me 3 years to get up enough nerve to see if I could get it published. I did get it published, in July of 2020, in the darkest hour of COVID. Every single book event I had scheduled with my book launch at the Pat Connery Literary Center, every single thing was canceled. I just plugged along. When the world opened back up again, I managed to get a few things. But the magic is there. If you truly believe it, it is there. And 2 years into this, and I'm already writing my Red Starfish book at the time, I'm contacted by an Italian-American publisher who wants to translate my book into Italian. And so I now have a book called Un'Americana in Salento. And the greatest part of all of this, the mayor of that little town invited me to come back and do my book presentation in the main square. Now, of course, that was before he was indicted for corruption. I didn't discover that until I got off the plane, and that publisher met me and said, I don't know what we're going to do. The guy's not going to be there. They've hauled him off to jail. But the vice mayor stepped in and introduced me, and I had a book tour of all of Puglia and southern Sicily, and it was just amazing. Are you available for a Zoom on such and such a date? And I said, sure. So we Zoom, and she says to me, I love this book, but have you ever heard that but when it sounds so loud and horrible and miserable? But, and so I'm holding my breath. She says, but I would like to sign you on for 3 books in a mystery series, with Red Starfish being the first book. You know, and it's terrible on Zoom because, you know, you have to comb your hair, put on lipstick and all that stuff. And I know my mouth was just like wide open and drool had to be coming out of it or something. And I go, oh, okay, I can do that. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I said to Stephanie, Cat says she wants to come home to the Lowcountry, so there has to be a 4th book. And she said, well, I suspect we have to listen to her, don't we? So there will be a book number 4. My skin is loosely knitted flesh, full of imperfections. I ask myself, what one thing would allow me to fit back into my skin, to become me? 37 years I've floundered in a body that doesn't recognize me. It started the day I was born next to Stella. I grew up in her shadow, the shadow of perfection. From the beginning, my mother compared us and asked only one question: why can't you be more like Stella? South Carolina has over 500,000 acres of salt marshes, more than any other state. The coastline teems with life. Species range from the sublime to the dangerous. A good day is full of blue herrings, nesting ospreys, snowy egrets, rusty sandpipers, marsh wrens, clapper rails, and a Broadway production performed by a pod of dolphins dancing in the Beaufort River. On a bad day, spiders, mosquitoes, no-see-ums wait to attack. A marsh snake might slither out of the spartina, or a gator might open its jaws to a foot straying off the path. Pluff mud, if disregarded, can suck a body into its sulfurous thickness and will it to suffocate. But it is not nature that is without a moral compass. It is the human predator, the one who has a choice and chooses evil. this title, part of it comes from Solo in Salento. And when you read Solo in Salento, you'll find an amazing mosaic floor in this little town of Otranto. It was designed in 1163 by a monk named Pantaleone, and it is the tree of life. It is absolutely an amazing thing. So that was in my mind as I was thinking about the second book. And then I read an article in the New York Times about the Moringa tree. The Moringa tree, if we all could grow this tree, it's out of India, it would cure or resolve all the poverty that we have. Every part of this tree can be used, whether for food, fertilizer, all sorts of things. Interestingly enough, again, it's the Eastern thoughts versus the Western thought in medicine. This tree has been healing people for ages and ages. It is now being grown in Arizona. And I want to tell you, and I had so hoped there was a big screen TV so I could bring videos and things that I have. But recently, a friend of mine found a moringa tree in Columbia, South Carolina, and she brought it to me. And these things grow leaps and bounds. And she brought it to me, and it was about this tall. How tall is it right now? It's about, and I've had it less than a month. It's just amazing. So I've got it in a pot because I'm so fearful. We're getting ready to leave for Italy for 2 months, and I'm so fearful that when I'm gone, it'll grow 15 feet. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. So I hope that answered your question about the type. In every type, like One Note Murders, which is the third book, in Solo in Salento, there's a chapter called Night Music. And I wanted to name the book Night Music, but as when you're a writer, you go out on Amazon and you search titles. There must have been, 300 books with the title Night Music. So everything I looked for kept coming up. Oh, we've got too many of those. So I chose One Note Murders. And it's based on a Bocelli concert that I went to in Italy, and the song, the opera Turandot. So there are 3 riddles in that opera, if you know about it. And so I have 3 parts to that book with a clue in each one as to what happens. And Stella, Cat has gone back to Italy to attend that concert as a birthday celebration that she and Stella had planned. Yes, sir.
Is there somebody that you think just writes great? Or who's your favorite author or somebody you...
It's embarrassing, Pat Conroy. I'm a docent at the center, and I've read everything, and I was lucky enough to meet him first in 1995, and then I was lucky enough to meet him several times after I moved to Beaufort before he died. He has set this high bar. I mean, I want to be a Pat Conroy clone. I want people to underline the words in my books. I want them to quote them, But there's only one Pat Conroy. Now, there are mystery writers that really have impacted my mystery writing, and that's Louise Penny, who's a Canadian author, and many of you probably have read her series, which is wonderful, Inspector Gamache. And then there's an Italian writer, Andrea Camilleri, who wrote the Inspector Montalbano series that takes place in Sicily. And so those 2 writers, very different ways of developing characters, but very much an influence.